They've got a great history, of course, at the Maryland Jockey Club. The Preakness meet is underway at Pimlico after a terrific winter at Laurel. The weather may have been terrible, but that didn't stop anybody from enjoying the winter season. And Gabby Gaudet's contributions, of course, have been very much appreciated by horse players. She joins us now on Night School. Gabby, thanks for coming out tonight.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, and it's a pleasure to watch the broadcast and the feed. The season at Pimlico well underway, and in fact, you guys taking advantage of the good weather in the Mid-Atlantic and carting as many grass races as Georgianne Hale can fill.
You got that right. Oh, man, we definitely did have kind of a rough winter there at Laurel, just from the weather. But, you know, it happened throughout the Mid-Atlantic and even New York. You know, it was just a tough winter for everybody on the East Coast, besides, with the exception of Florida, of course. But now we're finally getting to the turf course. It's beautiful. We redid half of it before last season, and then we finally finished it all, the turf course talking about. So got a beautiful new turf course at Pimlico, and it's been great so far.
Well, and so much to look forward to as we build up to Preakness Day. And, of course, tomorrow in the racing office, Georgianne will set up a good series of stakes. Earlier today this morning had Graham Motion on, and he talked about Miss Ella. She's going to appoint for the Miss Preakness. And we also talked, Arnaud Delacour. He's headed back to Fair Hill and looking forward to bring Ageless to the very one. So all the usual suspects are headed for the undercards, and of course once we get through Derby, we'll have a terrific Preakness to look forward to. And we're also looking forward to Friday because Ben's Cat back on the Hilltop turf course.
Yes, everyone, it's funny because everyone, whenever they bump into King Leatherberry at the track, they keep saying, when's Ben coming back? When's Ben coming back? And he's just a fan favorite in Maryland. I can even remember being out at Arlington last summer and, peeking over to the televisions to watch him run back on the East Coast, whether it be in New York or at Parks or Maryland. So he's just a fan favorite here, and he's coming back at the age of 9, this old class horse. I'm really excited for him to make his 2015 debut on Friday.
Well, and of course, the debut that you've made has been splashy on the scene at the Maryland circuit. And when it comes to helping people identify horses and how to apply them, give us your introductory remarks about a modest bankroll and applying it to greatest success.
Honestly, I was actually listening into the show before I came on, and I agree with everything that either Jim said or Jeremy or even what you said as well, because it's to each his own, to be honest. But my main thing when I'm wagering is I never like to spend a lot of money. My mom's always told me I'm cheap, and that's pretty much what it is. But I never like to spend a whole lot of money. But be confident when you make your wagers. And that's the main thing. If you're looking at your pick 4 ticket and it's over $100 for, yourself on a random Saturday, that's probably too much. You could probably just go with your A horses, even B horses, throw in a couple nice prices if you don't know what to do in a particular race, what I honestly sometimes do, because that's the thing. You're not going to be overly confident. If you're playing those multi-race sequences, you're not going to be overly confident in maybe 1 or 2 races, depending on if you're playing a pick 4, pick 5, or now we have the 10-cent Rainbow 6. So honestly, you go with a horse that you like in one of those races that you're not so confident about, but use maybe one of the longest shots on the board. Use a second choice. Just be kind of creative and be confident in it. Don't spend mass amounts of money when you could probably spend half of what you initially draw up.
In terms of one of the areas that you can provide, one of the fascinating elements of your background, which also mirrors Maggie Wolfendale's, both from Towson State and both daughters of successful, long-standing horsemen. And in terms of physical properties and identifying horses that are touting themselves, one challenge, Gabby, for players, particularly when you're on a fairly short budget, is the influence of suggestions, frankly, from commentators, especially when it's coming from people who have a proven record of success identifying horses that very well deserve extra attention based on how they're coming into a race physically. Add some thoughts to your approach and the circumstances when a horse that you hadn't necessarily considered is showing up on track as, being bettable strictly on physical properties.
Physical handicapping is one of my favorite things, and honestly, I find that is one of my strongest suits. It doesn't really help in multi-race sequences because when you put that pick 4 ticket in, you get to race 6, and you think, oh, this horse looks great in the paddock. Oh, well, good luck. But no, looking at horses, the physical properties of horses, the main thing that I take into consideration is a difference. So if you see a filly in the paddock who's always nervous, she's walking around kind of with her head in between her legs and she's not on her toes, but she's always like that, and she's proven in the past that she can run like a racehorse. Well, then yes, you have to go with that. That's what she's normally like. On the other hand, if you get, say, a nice colt in there who's always really high on himself, on his toes, and then you get him, for example, a horse that I'm really familiar with, Smash and Grab at Laurel. You know when he's going to run his race. In the paddock, he can be, if you see him really down on energy, not confident in himself in the paddock, you know that he's probably not going to give his best effort, and vice versa. So the biggest thing is to pay attention to differences, especially behaviorally, how horses are different from race to race, but also their physicality and how it matches with the particular conditions of the race. If you see this long, leggy filly for Grand Motion and she's going 5.5 furlongs in debut, well, she's probably not going to run her best race. They're probably just trying to get a prep race into her and stretch her out to a mile and 16th in the future. So that's huge, especially to see horses in the flesh and see kind of what they're built to do.
In terms of your kind of evolution as a player and as your involvement in the game, and obviously you've been close to it from day one. As soon as you recognized what it was that your parents were doing, how have you changed, and how have you gained confidence that you talked about? What suggestions do you make to those that are starting out and are starting with a modest amount of money?
It's huge. So my background, when I grew up in the industry, my parents are both trainers as well as my sister. I galloped horses throughout high school and college. So, I have a familiarity with that in the past. But the main thing is, from a confidence perspective, when you go to the windows or when you're even analyzing a race on air, you have to find what your strong suits are and kind of go from there, because, certain people are very good at predicting pace. They're very good with certain numbers, whatever numbers you want to use, whether it's, the Ragson numbers, Beyer numbers. With some people are really good with physical handicapping. So you just have to try it. Honestly, that was the first couple of months of my career on air in horse racing, was finding my niche. And once I finally got that, then you can kind of you can go from there and have a little bit of confidence when you're going to the window.
Well, and certainly as you gain the experience and as you identify areas that are key spots that help you win or that you identify with success, it just enhances your whole approach, and that confidence grows, and it's born from success and identifying the learning curve and knowing that you're getting better at whatever aspect of the game you're trying to improve.
Yes, and also not being afraid to be wrong. I think that's one thing that at least I was intimidated by in the beginning was you see an 80-1 shot. No lie, this happened the first winter that I had the job at the Maryland Jockey Club, and I saw an 80-1 shot, first-time starter for a maiden age condition in the paddock, and I thought he looked absolutely fantastic, that he should be running in a maiden special weight. And I was very timid to say it on air or to tweet it or anything like that, but I finally gained enough confidence to do it, and the horse wound up winning at 80-1. Or some odds like that, maybe 50-1, maybe he went down to 50-1. But, you have to be, if you're wrong with a horse that's 80-1. But if you're right, well, you can pat yourself on the back at the end of the day.
I want to jump in and just piggyback that statement you made about finding what you're good at and your strengths and going with it. I think that is so important. Steve had a comment, I think it's even been 2 years ago, not even in this year's night schools, that he underlines the winning races and highlights them in the past performances of horses. He wants to see where they run their best and when they've done their best. And I think we do that same thing with ourselves. Take your style, put that highlighter pen to it, and find out where you win. It's about where you win, not where you lose. And you can kind of find your strengths that way. And I think if we all handicap ourselves as much as we handicap the horses, that this kind of money management topic can really hit home for you.
I completely agree with you. It's all about being confident in yourself, and honestly, I don't think you need to spend mass amounts of money when constructing tickets, and just go with your gut. Honestly, when I go to the window, when I bet some of my pick sixes or what have you, I never spend over $40. That's pretty much my top out there, because once you go past $40, $50, then you're second-guessing yourself, and that's never a good thing.
Gabby, I had a quick question because of the discussion about physicality especially, and you and I on the same page with that, or the importance, at least in our individual styles of handicapping. And I know we both will play the multi-race wagers, but I'm just curious, do you kind of find yourself spending more of your budget on individual races or betting races more vertically versus horizontally? In other words, exactas, trifectas, superfectas, or even just to win or otherwise within the race, because of the fact that you do use physicality, versus a lot of times in those multi-race wagers, we don't get the shot to see them beforehand, so it's sometimes hard to be able to, you can play them, but you can't necessarily tie up quite as much money or as much in them without being able to see each leg beforehand.
That's a great question, Keaton, and honestly, it depends. I like to go back and forth, but if I see a horse who absolutely looks fantastic in the race, I'd be more inclined to bet that race vertically, horizontally. But when you look at a card in itself, and this is the same thing, when you feel really confident about 3 or 4 races in, a pick 5 sequence, then I'd be more inclined to play those multi-race sequences. But I take a lot of consideration, you and I both do it, into the physical appearances of horses. And honestly, I just did it last weekend at Pimlico. There were 2 horses who really stood out to me on the post parade, and I bet them in the exacta, and sometimes that's what I do if they just really stand out to me in the paddock or on the track.
Well, and just being in tune and having a whatever influence it takes to put your hand in your pocket, and if you can afford it, it's always worth doing, because if you're moved, nothing's worse than having that feeling and bypassing it. Yes, you still have the money, but it's not the same, knowing that you had a good inkling and a good notion. You got to have self-control and you got to manage the budget, but don't be shy either, because yes, there'll be another race, but trust your instincts is I think the bottom line, and the instincts have been very good when it comes to paying attention to the cards at Laurel and now at Pimlico, and the meet off to a good start. The grass season intensifying, and it'll build up to Preakness weekend. Gosh, it's hard to believe that we're less than 5 weeks away, Gabby.
I know, it's all happening so fast. I feel like just last week I was back at Laurel in the paddock in sub-zero weather, but no, it's excellent. We're finally getting to the turf course, and even if you're looking to play Pimlico races, taking into consideration what I've noticed over the course of the past couple of years, and even thus far at the meet so far, there are certain particular trainers that really have a good meet at Pimlico, and they might be a little bit cold at Laurel or throughout the Mid-Atlantic, but then they come to Pimlico and they really, really have a fantastic meet. And so far at the meet, we've seen, even though we're only a couple of days in, we've seen, trainers like Dane Kabisky be really good at sprinting on the turf. We see trainers like Hugh McMahon and Karen McGee really good with those claiming horses, either lower level, mid-level claimers, and Hammy Smith, Graham Motions, those trainers getting their horses on the turf after a nice long, especially Hammy Smith. Graham shipped his horses, obviously, but Hammy Smith getting his horses onto the turf for the first time after that long winter. They come up from South Carolina. And once we get into the 2-year-old races, we have trainers like Salzman, Wesley Ward, Phil Schoenfeld do really well with their young horses, even Donald Barr. So those are just a couple of names to throw out there if you're looking to handicap and bet Pimlico within the next couple of weeks.
Well, and then, of course, there's been a large number of New York outfits that are shipping in as well, not to mention an outfit like Tom Proctor's now at Fair Hill, and Proctor will start to invade the entry box as well. So a new landscape in Maryland, and things have been excellent, and that includes the broadcast team and Gabby Gaudet. A real pleasure, and looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks at Baltimore and Alibi Breakfast and everything that goes into the great week that culminates with the Black-Eyed Susan, the Pimlico Special, and the Preakness Stakes. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Have a good night, guys.